Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us again. We are Industry.live and today we are back with Rocco. I found Rocco on LinkedIn. He made an amazing post about how people are moving to smaller towns and he runs a company that specializes in exactly doing that. So he's going to talk to us about this trend, what's behind it, and how people are making the transition. Rocco, it's great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself for our audience, please?
Hey, I'm Rocco. I've been in the SaaS and tech industry for 25 years. I started in the late 90s, and have worked at startups that whole time. Typically, early stage bootstrap startups, or companies that had just raised a seed round or a Series A, and I was often the first go to market hire in a lot of those organizations, initially in sales and then in marketing. But I recently retired from tech for a lot of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, I live with my family in a small town about an hour east of Seattle in the Cascade Mountains, and that's a big part of why I started Small Town Move.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So there has been a trend just after COVID for a lot of people to move to smaller towns for a variety of reasons. And typically back then it was because everyone had remote work and the expectation was that people would continue with remote work. So they moved to smaller towns because housing was more affordable. They could be with family and they could have larger spaces, all of that. But in more recent times, the reason for that move has shifted slightly towards the change in the tech space, particularly with AI. So AI is automating a lot of jobs. It's removing layers in organizations. Obviously, we've seen huge layoffs across tech companies as well as other kinds of industries. And that's prompting people to sort of, make the decision early to, change or pivot in their career, move to a smaller town and either buy, some of these old businesses, old boring businesses, or sort of invest in careers that are new. For example, buying large farms and investing in farming or agriculture of some kind so that they can work with their hands and sort of prepare for a different career altogether. So can you tell me about your perspective on this? Because my perspective obviously is based on research, secondary research that I've done. You have a huge advantage having spoken to people and of course, delivering that move with your company.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly what you said. I mean, my personal journey for kind of discovering small town life started long before ChatGPT came out and the sort of AI race and AI transformation started, changing the way we work and kind of what our lives might look like. I was burned out for a lot of reasons in my corporate tech job. I'd say like I was it'd been bothering me for years that none of what we were doing seemed real. It just seemed to me like it was a lot of software companies selling software to other software companies who were selling software to other software companies. And it all just sort of seemed to lack meaning or any connection to real life. And so that was the first problem for me. I just for a long time in my career, I was motivated by the challenge, by the money, but I started to just struggle with whether or not, these companies I was working at, what would really be the worst thing that happened? Companies just disappeared. Some tech companies are really, really important. Most of them just felt like an abstraction from real life to me. And so ways to leave my job in tech. But that kind of brought about the next big problem, which is that I realized that I wasn't really qualified to do anything else that would make nearly as much money. Right. And so, have echoed is that, when you make a lot of money, you sort of create a prison for yourself where you spend a lot of that money. Right. I had a fancy house by the lake. We took really fancy vacations. We door dashed sushi in the middle of the week. Our kids went to really like fancy schools. And so I wanted to leave tech, but I didn't, I couldn't make the math work. I couldn't figure out how I could live a life that allowed for less money. And so that was where it originally came about. I started researching, and it just a few things became clear pretty quickly, right? Number one, everyone talks about, how real estate is unaffordable and like young people can't buy homes, and that's true. And yet there are still like thousands of towns where you can buy a house for 150, 200,000, right? But there are small towns that nobody has heard of. And so you started, finding these like amazing small towns with inexpensive homes for sale, much lower cost of living. And then but then if you still need to work, right? The way to support, if you have a remote tech job, that's great. You should move to one of these small towns right now. But if you don't, or if you want to get out of tech, me, then you need to figure out some other way to earn a living. Or just for me, I've been lucky to make a lot of money, but I'm still young. I'm in my early 40s. I'm not like done working for the rest of my life. I need something to do. And so the next challenge was like figuring out what I was going to do with my time and how I was going to earn money. I started having to explore that as well, right? I was one of these kids, I was born in 1980 in a community where the only discussion about a life path and a career path, I think for a lot of people like me that are my age, was to finish high school, get into the best college you can, graduate college, and get a white collar office knowledge worker job. There was zero discussion in my high school, among my friends, with my parents, with my extended community, on the media. There was zero discussion about any alternative path to that. And so for me, I had to discover the world of like starting a business or maybe buying a blue collar business. That's the other amazing thing about small towns is that, again, one of the stats that I'm sure you've seen, Roy, that's out there is that there are millions of people that are retiring right now, small business owners that are retiring, and there's just not enough people for them to sell their business to. So if you're in a busy place like the city of Seattle, yeah, there's a lot of competition to buy profitable businesses. But in the vast majority of small towns across America, every day small businesses are just being closed. Profitable businesses are just being closed because there's no successor, there's no one to buy the business. And that's because there's just not enough people living in these amazing small towns. And so this just led to like a multi-year journey. By the way, meanwhile, uh, I was working my tech job, just being miserable, just continuing to be burned out, continuing to not have the courage to actually like pull the trigger. And the final straw for me, by the way, of like what actually led to me retiring from tech and just deciding to do something else was just my kids. I mean, I became pretty determined. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. I became pretty determined to show them a different path, right? Show them that building a life around freedom and flexibility and happiness and hobbies was more important than building a life and career around financial success and titles and moving up through the ranks, right? And so if you play that out, I'm preparing my kids not to go to college. They may want to go to college. They may ultimately choose a career path that requires college. But another one of the mega stats that is out there is that there's a lot of kids graduating from college with 6 figures of debt. They can't get a job or they're underemployed. Will never be able to afford to buy a house. They'll never be able to pay off their student loans. I don't want that to happen to my kids, not just because of the financial part of it, but because, most of the white collar workers I know are miserable. So most people that go to college end up getting a white collar job and they end up being miserable. And so I was living one life, but trying to teach my kids another life. And the hypocrisy and disconnect of that just became too much. And so that's ultimately what led to me quitting my job. And that's what I want to do with small town move. There's almost 10,000 towns in America with homes for sale under $200,000 or, where you can buy land really, really inexpensively, $5,000 an acre. And so if you live in one of these amazing, welcoming small towns and your cost of housing is really inexpensive, then you can start a small business or buy a small business. You don't need to make $300,000 a year to be able to live a comfortable life. And that means a lot of these kids that probably shouldn't be going to college don't need to go to college anymore. They don't need to rack up that debt, and they don't need to find a white collar job that they're going to hate. But it's actually really hard to find these small towns, right? If you go to Google and just type in most affordable small town, best small town, most charming small town, you'll get a bunch of listicles. Most of the people writing these articles have never visited the towns. The articles on there have like stock photography in them. And actually what you'll start to notice is the same 200 or 300 towns get mentioned over and over. And they're leaving out another 6 or 8 thousand towns that are absolute amazing hidden gems. I live in a beautiful town called Duval that you can't find unless someone tells you about it or you know you're looking for it. And there's thousands of towns like this. And so that's what I'm trying to do with Small Town Move. I'm trying to help young people find an alternative. I hate actually calling it an alternative because that implies there's something wrong with it. Finding a life path where they can build a career that doesn't require a college degree, where they can do something that they love, and they can keep their expenses low. And by the way, living in a small town, it's amazing. I'm surrounded by nature. We're actually part of a community. It's beautiful. That's that's how I got here. That's my multi-year journey for getting here, to quitting my job in tech and starting smalltownmove.com so I can help other people do the same thing.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And that's definitely a very, very bold move that you've made over a couple of years. You said that you're helping people make that transition for themselves. What kind of roles are people making that transition from? Do you see a vast sort of difference in career stages that people actually sort of make the move from, or are you seeing, young folks as well as more senior, more established career leavers taking this initiative?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Nobody knows what to do, Roy. So, I posted on LinkedIn to my community, which is other tech workers, right? And so the people that I'm hearing from are in the same trap that I was in, right? They make a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? And yet they built a lifestyle around that as well. So a lot of people came back to me and said, Rocco, like I identify with everything you're saying. I'm burned out, but either A, I'm not qualified to make money any other way. That's how I felt. I felt like I was really, really good at B2B tech marketing and wasn't really sure how I could make money any other way. Number two, even if I could find another career, I wouldn't make as much money and therefore I won't be able to support my lifestyle. And so, yeah, that's the first thing that we need to figure out is we need to, and this is what I'm trying to do, although I don't have it all figured out yet. We need to create a playbook to help tech workers make that transition to starting a business or owning a business, what I would call an IRL business, in real life business. Um, that's that's the first thing, right? There's plenty of websites where you can go and, like, you know exactly what you're looking for, you can browse businesses for sale. But if you're not from that world, you can't read what's on, bizbuysell.com. You can't read that and figure out if that's a good fit for you, or if as a tech person your skills apply to that. So that's kind of the problem that I'm seeing with a lot of the people in the tech world. Then there's a whole other group of people, right? There's young people, right? There's people that are in high school trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life, or they're in college, or they just graduated college. And every day on TikTok, there's literally thousands of videos of young people saying that they just graduated college, they just started their job, they're absolutely miserable, and they can't imagine spending another 40, 50 years that way. And they're not even making that much money. So it's not even like they can console themselves with their beautiful condo or their nice vacations, right? Again, um, I mean, we need to create a playbook for these young people, right? Because most of us grew up just being told of one way to do it: go to college, get a degree, get a white collar job, make a lot of money, and then build your life that way. I'm trying to teach my kids the opposite. I'm telling my kids they probably should not go to college. I'm telling my kids to stay at home as long as they possibly can. I'm telling them that the most likely path to having a happy life is finding a career around something you love and maximizing for freedom or flexibility. So you don't have to start a business or buy a business, but certainly doing that gives you the most freedom and flexibility. And so I want them to keep their expenses low, stay at home as long as they possibly can, find something they love where they have freedom and flexibility, which is probably going to be starting or buying a business and building their life that way. But I just don't know if that's if how to do that or that playbook is apparent. And so because there aren't a lot of answers for the burned out tech people like me or for the young people, that's why I started smalltownmove.com. But that's also why I'm trying to create a community of people around it who can help sort of create this playbook for how to live this different kind of lifestyle.
So when you said that you've come from, the tech space, compensation is high for a lot of young people, like you mentioned, they haven't had that. They haven't seen that high compensation. So what can they expect when they move to a small town? What kind of income can they get? What kind of, what does buying a typical small business look like? I know there's no one answer for this. It obviously, so it depends on what kind of negotiation you have with the owner, what kind of equity they want, whether they want to retain that equity or they want you to pay it off over a certain period of time, your credit and how much money banks will give you. But overall, is there a single sort of structure or something you can tell people listening to this podcast about so that they can start thinking about this and start being like, okay, this is what it might look like, and this is what I need to sort of think about before I reach out to Rocco for some help.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not like a coach. I don't I'm simply trying to give the information to people. I don't feel qualified to be a coach. But yeah, I mean, so this is where we can bring AI back into it, right? So the other problem, if you're whether you're in your career now or whether you're, graduating, trying to figure out what you're going to do, we're all trained to do these jobs that might not exist in 5 or 10 years, right? I upset a lot of people the other day with a LinkedIn post where I said the job that I was in, product marketing. I think that basically 90% of people are doing that job, say B2B tech product marketing. You won't need them. Uh, so if you believe you're a top 5%, you know, B2B tech marketer, great. If you have that skill already, and then you're willing to learn how to become an AI expert managing agents to do the work of the other people, you probably will continue to have a career. But I think, most of those jobs will be gone. So it probably starts like this decision, this path of what are you going to do in this small town starts with finding a job that AI is not likely to replace in the next 10 years. Microsoft published a great list of these jobs, the jobs that are most applicable to AI skill and capability, and the jobs that are least applicable to AI skills and capability. And so there's some pretty cool jobs that are at the top of the list of occupations that AI is the least likely to replace over the next 10 or 20 years. One that was at the very top of the list that has basically a 0% AI applicability score is called dredge operators. They literally manage lakes and bodies of water to keep them healthy by dredging up and moving around matter and lakes. It took me a few minutes to figure out what this was all about. And then it took me only a few more minutes to find that there are companies in small towns all over the US that are hiring dredge operators right now. And guess what it takes to be a dredge operator? Almost nothing. They just hire you. You work under an experienced dredge operator for a few months, and then you're a full-fledged dredge operator. And dredge operators right off the bat make $50,000 or $60,000 a year and eventually make six figures. Now, again, we've trained young people when they hear $50,000 or $60,000 a year to think, oh, I would be a failure if I make $50,000 or $60,000 a year. That's ridiculous and sad, honestly. But it's also just not, the math is not correct. So I found a company in an amazing little town called Hale, Michigan, that's hiring dredge operators. Hale, Michigan is the land of 60 lakes. It is one of the most beautiful places you can imagine. If you Google Hale, Michigan, you will see photographs of an adorable small town, some of the most stunning nature scenes you could ever imagine. And then if you go to realtor.com or Redfin and type in Hale, Michigan, you will find many cute little homes for sale under 200,000, right? So if you want to be a dredge operator, and, work a few hours a day. You'd be outside in nature. You'd be doing something IRL that really like actually it kind of matters to the real world. Yeah, you might only make $50 right away, but you can buy a house immediately with your $50,000 job because the down payment on a 3% down payment on a $175,000 home is $5,000. The mortgage payment on that is eight, nine hundred, $1,000 a month, right? And so you will own a home. You will have an amazing IRL job. You'll be in nature all day. You need no certification or degree for that. You'll work in nature and you'll live in this adorable small town. And so, yeah, like that's only one example. A lot of people are probably like, oh, dredge operator, not for me. But there's tons of other examples: water treatment plant operators, pile drivers. Google pile driver. Those women and men get to do amazing stuff. A lot of things to do with like roofing and home refurbishing. There's a ton of these jobs that are not likely to get replaced by AI. Yeah, they only make $50 to $100,000 a year for the first, 5 or 10 years. But if you live in a small town and your home is $200,000, you live a great life on that. And so you don't even have to buy that business. You can just be an employee. You can just show up at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 if that's what you want to do. But a lot of the people that own those businesses are also now they're trying to retire. And so, the other option is obviously to buy one of these businesses. And there's a huge misconception out there that I've seen firsthand and discovered from a number of people that, profitable businesses are expensive and hard to buy. Yeah, if you live within 30 minutes of a major city, there's a lot of rich people and companies who are buying up profitable businesses to add to their portfolio. So they pay cash up front. They drive up the prices. They make it harder and more competitive. But in Hale, Michigan, and places like that, places that nobody's ever heard of, right? That you can't find on Google unless you do a lot of research. You don't have that. You have the opposite of that. You have people who are retiring every day and just shutting their business down because there's no one to buy it. So in those situations, it's not competitive. You can get incredible. There's businesses that do 6 figures in profit that where the sellers will offer seller financing. So you pay to buy the business with the profits from running the business. They will stay on for months and train you. Again, the these businesses are a lot of them are not likely to be replaced by AI anytime soon. Yeah. Now, one of the challenges is that all this information you need to like make a big life choice like this is on a bunch of different websites, right? So you can go to bizbuysell.com and browse businesses. But if you see a dredge operator business in Hale, Michigan, like you don't know if Hale, Michigan is a good town, if it's safe, if it's beautiful. You don't know anything about that, right? You then have to go to like realtor.com or Redfin to look at the real estate. You have to go to all these different places to get the information. And that's why it was actually really hard for me to find these small towns. Even using ChatGPT, right? The most recent time that I searched for small towns, I spent hours and hours on ChatGPT. But ChatGPT doesn't show you pictures. So you have to bounce around to a bunch of websites. And they also only know what Google knows, turns out. Turns out GPT-4 and GPT-5 basically give you answers that come from pages that are trusted by Google. So you have the same limited information. And so that was kind of the like original problem I was trying to solve with smalltownmove.com is in order to make it all work, you kind of need to like discover like, oh, is this a town for me? Is it in the location I want with the weather I want? Does it have the type of community that I want? I talked to a guy recently who was looking to move to a small town. He had all this list of criteria. Then on top of that, in addition to all of his criteria, he needed it to be within 45 minutes of a Mormon temple and a bowling alley, right? So in order to have all that information, plus see what businesses are for sale, what homes are for sale, that's what we're going to do with Small Town Move, is kind of combine all that together so you can go to one place to sort of try to find your ideal life, whether that's to, start a homestead and grow your own food and kind of live off grid, or just get a regular job that AI won't replace or buy a business. That's what we're going to do at smalltownmove.com.
That's pretty cool. So, is there any fear among people that large investment banks will sort of start looking at that and buying those up as well?
Well, yeah, again, they are. Are they? Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're doing it in big cities and popular suburbs. Um, I think, yeah, like anything else, there's two advantages to looking at, at small towns if you want to buy a business, right? The small town businesses are less likely to be at a scale that is interesting to private equity or, institutions, right? So a lot of times they're looking for businesses that have 500,000 or 1 million minimum in profit, right? You don't need that kind of business if you're just trying to like have a nice life. And so a lot of times those businesses are beneath the scale that that private equity and other institutions are looking for, and they're also harder to manage if they're in a small town, right? So a lot of times, what private equity does is they find a bunch of these bigger, more profitable small businesses. They're buying small businesses that are on the very big end of what you would consider small business, and they combine them together to get scale and efficiencies. But again, it's harder to put a portfolio together of a bunch of plumbing businesses that you can combine together in small towns because A, they're smaller, and B, there's less density. So could it happen over time? Absolutely. But is it going to be slower to happen in small towns like Hale, Michigan? Absolutely.
How far along are you with your your project and your business? You're aggregating all of these, different sources of information. You're building an ecosystem around it. So how far along are you in terms of, getting all of that together so that when someone comes, they can look to you for all of that information in one place?
Yeah, smalltownmove.com is live now, but it's just a landing page. You can sign up for the wait list. But yeah, the product should be live in early September. Hopefully the version we launch in September will be good enough to get some value from it. We're gonna start small. What was important to me about when I retired from B2B software this year was that for what was right for me about my small business was no investors, no co-founders, no employees. I'm restricting the amount of time that I work to when my kids are in school because I want to be there to have breakfast with them in the morning. And I want to pick them up from the bus. I want to be present while we're doing homework. I want to play after school. And so in order to prioritize what matters to me, which is my kids and my family, I needed to put guardrails in place to make sure that the business works for me and not the other way around. And so for that reason, it made sense to do things myself. So I I'm not well funded. I don't have a big team, but I do have a pretty good sense of having gone through this process a bunch of times and interviewed a bunch of people of what the process is now. And I think the version we launch in September, while it won't be perfect, will have a lot of valuable information that'll help people kind of go through the process that I went, but faster and easier.
This sounds really interesting to me. But one question I have would be, when I'm thinking of small town businesses, economics would be something I think about in the sense, if I buy a laundromat, for example, there wouldn't be enough people in town to sort of, get enough revenue. So what are some of those, moving pieces or logistical sort of things that you think about when you're considering a smaller business to buy or recommend to someone to buy?
Yeah. So again, I am not a small business coach or broker. I'm not an expert on the economics of what make a small business like the right kind of purchase. And so I won't pretend to give advice on that, but I will say that I mean, in my town here in Duval, I mean, some of the small businesses, the owners clear seven figures in profit every year. So yeah, there may be towns where you don't want to buy the laundromat because there's just not enough. There's just not enough opportunity to make money. But every time you go through the process of buying a small business, you get to see all of those numbers. And most of the time, not all of the time, often the best businesses for sale are ones that are not doing that well, mainly probably because the owner was like not took their eye off the ball, right? Like they've been coasting, they've been on autopilot, they're ready to retire. So somebody that comes in with some fresh energy and ideas, I think has a big opportunity. But again, small business doesn't necessarily mean small profit, and small town doesn't necessarily mean, you know, there's cobwebs and there's dust blowing through town. My small town of 20,000 people um, has like a really vibrant knit community. It has multiple Facebook groups where people discuss the business of the town and ensure that people buy local and promote local businesses. There's a lot of opportunity. But yeah, I part of what I'm going to do with smalltownmove.com is bring in other experts who are more knowledgeable about like the questions to ask and the details that you need to understand before you buy a business. I'm not an expert on that.
Cool. All right, so I think I have a lot of the answers that I was looking for. I think this is really interesting and exciting. Are there any questions that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Yeah, you didn't ask me what's the best thing about living in a small town.
Oh, please, yes,
But
tell me.
I'll
What is
answer.
the
I'll
best
tell
thing
you.
about what's
It's
the best thing
different
about
for
living in a
everybody.
small town?
For me, it's the
Yeah.
farmers markets. Every day of the week, I can drive between 10 and 30 minutes to a farmer's market because my small town is surrounded by other small towns. Some of them are, 10 or 20 miles away. But, that's a 10 or 20-minute drive down like a beautiful back road highway with nature. So I don't mind. But the farmers markets in small towns are absolutely amazing. In fact, you don't even need, if you want fresh eggs or freshly baked bread, or if you want to, pick apples in the fall or blueberries and blackberries in the summer, you don't even need to go to a farmer's market half the time. I'm surrounded by neighbors who have working farms and ranches. A lot of them offer you pick. But just the amount of cool, fresh food and crafts that are available at the farmers markets in small towns are absolutely amazing. My family, there's a farmers market every Tuesday night that we absolutely don't miss, where there's always a great band. We buy fresh bread from one vendor, fresh cheese from another vendor. We have a picnic. We listen to the band. There's usually somebody selling either milk chocolate or ice cream that's locally made. And normally we grab some eggs to take home for the week. So that's my top thing about living in a small town is you'll eat better and you'll know where your food is coming from more than you ever have before.
Awesome. That's amazing. I love farmers markets, by the way. Right. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really fun talking to you. I loved our conversation, and I'm sure a lot of people will really enjoy listening to this, and it'll just give them more clarity about, what they should think about, and it'll give them more confidence in, sort of doing the research and going about it.
Yeah, Roy, I want to say one last thing too. If you like your office job, if you like your tech job, if you're confident that you're going to be able to use AI to become a 10x employee and you're not worried about it, like keep going. I'm happy for you. I do not think that you should see AI coming and just give up. If you're excited by it, if you love tinkering with it, this is going to be an amazing time for you. And by the way, if you like living in the big city, good for you too. There was a time in my life where I really love that. I'm not trying to judge anybody who's continuing to go down a different path. All I want is for people to be happy. And I have friends who still really love their tech jobs and are happy with that life. And so I'm really, I'm happy for those people too.
Thank you. Thank you, Rocco. It's been amazing.
Thanks.